And is there any evidence that he actually performed miracles?
Now we turn our attention to the contents of the Gospels. What kind of person do they portray? What do they tell us of Jesus himself?
The Gospels are biographies, but they're not biographies in the modern sense.
Modern biography depends upon first-hand accounts, tape recordings, video recordings, writings left behind by the subjects.
Just what kind of person do the Gospels portray? Non-biblical legend has Jesus traveling as far as Egypt and India during his early life. But the next image we get of Jesus in the Gospels is at his baptism. Jesus arrives at the Jordan River in order to be baptized by John, a religious zealot whose scraggy appearance and fiery preaching made him an unpopular outcast. According to the Gospel accounts, Jesus' baptism initiates a 3-year period of preaching and healing. He led a relatively normal life. He worked, he studied, he attended parties like wedding feast at Cana, where he apparently left an everlasting impression. Jesus and his disciples arrive as guests of a wedding. Ancient weddings are similar to modern weddings in several ways.
There was a real strong sense of reciprocity in the ancient Near East with weddings, where people would give very lavish gifts to this new bride and couple, and they expected a great party in return. Mary,
Jesus' mother, responsible for the meal, arrives at an embarrassing truth. They've run out of wine. Yet Jesus' response hints at his divine purpose.
He then tells the waiters to fill up these stone jars with water. He doesn't tell the waiters to look the other way or to leave the room as he brings a vial out or a potion and dumps it into the water. He merely tells them, okay, go ahead and start drawing the wine, and the water becomes wine.
Archaeologists have found pieces of large stone jars of the type the Gospel says Jesus used when he turned water into wine at a Jewish wedding in the Galilee village of Cana. This church at Cana is believed to be the site of Jesus' first miracle.
Coming up, what did archaeologists uncover that definitively proves one of the Bible's most notorious women really did exist?
The Gospels tell us that as Jesus walked the region, healing the lame and preaching the forgiveness of sin, an evil plot against his cousin John the Baptist was unfolding. John the Baptist had apparently offended Herod Antipas, the ruler over Galilee, and Herodias, his niece and new wife, by publicly denouncing their relationship as wicked. Herodias conspired with her daughter Salome to silence John the Baptist once and for all. Herod's birthday celebration provided a perfect occasion for their devious plan.
Evidently, the floor show was dull, and so his dear second wife, Herodias, in order to liven things up, had her dancing daughter, Salome, come out and do some sensuous dance, which evidently turned Herod's head. And so he says, ask what you will, and it's yours, even to the half of my kingdom. And so Salome, instead of doing the logical thing, asking for half of his kingdom, asked for the head of John the Baptist, who was in prison at that palace.
Herod honors his oath by providing Salome and her mother Herodias the head of the slain prophet. Equally startling, recent archaeological digs have shed light on the reliability of this gospel story.
New Testament also give us an important evidence about Herod Antipas in connection with the story of beheading the head of John the Baptist, which was apparently here, although the story is legendary, but the palace of Herod Antipas and the dance of Salome was exactly here on the remains that I'm going to show you. Because we found the pavement.
The dig, conducted in northern Israel in 2006, proved to be historic.
Perhaps you are the first camera team to take a picture of it. First whatsoever. First in history. Now, when we excavated the foundations of the Basilica, of the reception hall, we were completely surprised to find remains from the 1st century AD, even from the beginning of the 1st century. And we found beautiful marble floor, made of different colors, and we dated it by pottery and by coins to the 1st century. And since marble was so expensive, and since all the parallels for marble come from Herodian palaces, I'm almost convinced that this floor was part of the famous palace that Herod Antipas built, and that was the background for the famous dance.
Evidence from the field of archaeology lends the Gospel accounts a measure of historical credibility. According to the Gospels, Jesus continued to preach and demonstrate his power over nature. He used this power to ease the suffering of the people who believed in his message. Jesus was an itinerant preacher who often moved from town to town so as to spread his message. According to the Gospels, his journey brought him to the pool of Siloam. Blind from birth, the man visited Siloam in the hopes of receiving a miracle. The Jews believed an angel might appear at the pool, stir the waters, and offer divine healing. According to the Gospels, the man believed in the possibility of healing and received it at the hands of Jesus. But is there any evidence that such a place existed?
Well, of course, the great good news now is just a little bit further down the hill at Silwan, one of the suburbs of South Jerusalem. They've discovered, of course, the magnificent entrance to the pool.
The Gospels depict Jesus as exercising authority over several aspects of nature. Each miracle Jesus performed raised his profile and further convinced his disciples that he was the Messiah.
Among Jesus' miracles, one of the most spectacular, of course, is the stilling of the tempest.
One day, Jesus and his followers were out on the Sea of Galilee. Although familiar with the sea, a terrible storm whipped the disciples into a frightful panic.
And in the midst of this, the disciples are panicking. The breakers are splashing on the bow of the deck. They're afraid their ship might break up.
They rushed to wake Jesus from his sleep. Jesus rose to calm both the storm and their fears.
Again, this is a very strong statement of his authority, that all of creation must respond to his spoken word because he is their creator.
But are the basic facts of this story credible?
The Sea of Galilee is a very interesting place. It's actually in a bowl, and so they'd have violent windstorms as the wind would shoot through the mountains, and it would create very scary nautical situations.
One of the most exciting recent archaeological discoveries took place up in Galilee, where a boat that Jesus and the disciples could have used came to light in the spring of 1986.
The boat could hold 12 to 15 people, the amount suggested in the Gospels. The boat had a sleeping section consistent with the Gospel account.
Coming up, startling new evidence that the crucifixion of Jesus was an actual historical event, and eyewitnesses that claim the resurrection really happened.
The tragic events of the final days of Jesus' life parallels the outline mapped out by the Old Testament prophets. The Passion of Christ, as it is called, has captivated billions for centuries with its heartbreaking depiction of Jesus' final hours on earth. Over the years, many have become skeptical about the story of the Passion. Some claim its infamous characters such as Pontius Pilate and the Jewish high priest Caiaphas never even